Woo! Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, 6:05 a.m. Today is September 26th. Yes, and the countdown begins. The election is approaching very, very quickly. Early voting begins today in Illinois. I've got more on that, where you can vote, what that looks like, early voting. Also, this hour, I do want to talk about Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, pretending to kill a fly that he is pretending is Donald Trump. Yes, so Joe Biden does this on The View. He smacks a fly and he says, he indicates that the fly is Donald Trump. So we're going to chat about that. He hasn't made any kind of media appearances. It's unclear why our commander in chief is on The View when he should be running the country, but that's besides the point, I guess. I'll be chatting about that here this hour. I also want to talk about the school in New Hampshire. It's banned parents. They were wearing these armbands. This is really interesting. They were wearing these armbands that had XX written on them. They're pink armbands, and these armbands were meant to be a part of this silent protest about boys competing in girls' sports. So this school, the superintendent, signs off on trespassing orders, and they ban parents from ever entering the school or being on school grounds, which is absolutely ridiculous. All right, because this is America, we have the ability to freely express ourselves. So we're going to get to all of that. Early voting sites are open nearly in every county. Now, that's with the exception of Cook County and the city of Chicago, probably because they have to work on stealing the election. What? Huh? That wasn't me who said that. Cook County, the city of Chicago, their early voting sites are not open right now, but they're going to get their early voting sites open around early October. So early voting sites will be open in Illinois. Now, since 2015, I didn't realize, but we've been doing early voting for a long time. So since 2015, that's when the law changed to where early voting in Illinois is traditionally it's supposed to start 40 days prior to the election in Illinois, and that just falls on September 26th. I feel like every year it just feels like it's getting earlier and earlier and earlier, the early voting period. But it's the same. It's 40 days prior to the election day every year, and it's been that way for quite some time. So Illinois State Board of Elections, this is according to the Center Square spokesman Matt Dietrich, said at the start of early voting season, voters will likely have to vote at their county clerk's office, and then there will be more as time goes on, early voting locations popping up. So he said the reason for that is a couple weeks into the early voting process, and just a few weeks ahead of the election, you're going to see a substantial expansion of early voting locations in some large counties. A lot of smaller counties just keep it at the county clerk's office, the early voting period. I'm going to say go vote early. Really go vote early. There's I don't know what it is. It's I know exactly what it is. It feels weird to go vote early. Traditionally, election day is the day that you go vote in person. Go vote early. You don't want something to stop you from voting on election day. You never know what will happen. The kid's car accident, God forbid. But you do not want to allow your vote not to be cast. It's so crucial. This election is very crucial. Go vote early. And so the reason why polling locations, early voting locations, the reason why they kind of expand as time goes on. So in McLean County, there's the Bone Student Center. I think you can go vote early at. There's also like Eastland Mall. A lot of counties don't do that because they're not as large as McLean County. McLean County is pretty large. So there's a lot of counties, and it's up to their discretion how many early voting locations they have. And as it gets closer to election day, those tend to expand because more early votes are being cast. As you get closer to the election, more people go to early vote. So it makes sense that more early voting locations pop up. So, like I said, a lot of Illinois counties don't do that. A lot of them, the early voting process just takes place in the clerk's office. So you can do that today if you want to rush out and go vote early. Good power to you. I said go vote early. Okay. The problem with Republicans is that we are stuck in our ways and we like the tradition, right? I get it. You like the tradition of going out on. I've never voted. I've never voted early. I've always voted on election day, but it kind of works out for me because a lot of the time on election day, I'm going to polling places and I'm interviewing people and talking with people as they're coming out of the polling place. What's it like in there? Or I'll go in, I'll speak with the poll watcher, the election judges. There's going to be two of them. I'll get to that here in a second. What you will see. So if something doesn't look right, alert your authorities. So I'll get to that, but usually I go vote in person. Go vote early because you don't want to run the risk of your vote not being counted. And the Democrats have perfected voting early. And then also there's a site, I forget the name of it now, where you can go and you can say that you voted early. Okay. And then you can say who you voted for, and it will help the Trump team gauge how many votes have already been cast. So I'll get that website for you here just in a couple of minutes, but it helps the GOP figure out, well, who has already voted, and it kind of gives them a gauge when it comes to the numbers, how many people are actually going to go vote for Donald Trump. So, or vote Republican. The Republicans have set this up. It's a campaign. It's very interesting. I've never seen anything quite like that set up before, but I'm excited. So what to see at your early voting location, what you're going to see. Matt Dietrich, he says that the State Board of Elections, he's the State Board of Elections spokesman. He says it's the same as a regular polling place. So there's election judges. There's supposed to be two of them, checking voters in, handing them their ballot, and verification, signature verification. We don't have voter ID. We don't have anything like that in the United States. All they do is check your signature. And you're supposed to have two, one from each party, checking that signature and looking for that signature verification. So election judges, quote, this is Matt Dietrich. He says, election judges are there to assist you if you have any issues. If you make a stray mark on your ballot and the tabulator won't take it, you'll be able to get assistance from an election judge. Generally, what you'll find is you go into the clerk's office and then they'll have an early voting location set up in a designated area of their office. So, remember, there's two election judges, one Republican, one Democrat at the location, and they're verifying signatures. That's the law. I do want to talk about this because I question, the ability to staff. It's not that McLean County has an issue with it. I just questioned the State Board of Elections to see if this was a concern statewide. Matt Dietrich said that the State Board of Elections is not concerned, and that's not a problem, staffing or securing multiple early voting locations. He says that this isn't a problem statewide. So I asked that question because in the back of my head, I knew about what happened in October of 2022, the Bloomington Mall, Eastland Mall. Also, over early voting location, it was broken into, vandalized. You guys remember the story at the time. According to reports, McLean County Clerk Kathy Michael said there was no damage and nothing was stolen at the voting site. Dietrich called this incident an outlier. He said, quote, we haven't had reports of security problems with jurisdictions that have locations other than their central office. So that's my concern. That was the question I had asked the State Board of Elections. Are there issues statewide when it comes to opening up all of these early voting locations outside of the clerk's office? Do you have problems securing those places? Do you run into things like what happened at the Bloomington Mall in 2022? And he said, nope, it's an outlier. So I don't know. You're always going to run the risk of security issues when you have multiple places like that. But I have faith in the McLean County election authority. I'm sure that they're going to make sure it's all secure and it's going to be great. So go out, vote early. Do not wait until election day because you never know what will happen on election day. You're not you don't have a magic globe and you can't see into the future. So if you get sick, if the kids get sick, if you get pulled over and you get a ticket and you're late to the before the polls close and you don't get there in time, don't wait until last minute. All right. Do want to talk about this story. New Hampshire parents attending their daughter's soccer games, they were wearing pink armbands, and on the pink armbands, they had like XX, and that's supposed to be XX chromosomes, right? So they were banned from attending their daughter's soccer game. These parents were for wearing these armbands. And like I said, it's unclear if the superintendent realizes she lives in America and that this is America, but that's definitely not constitutional. You can't ban people for wearing armbands and expressing themselves. So according to the Post-Millennial, parents of high school athletes in New Hampshire have been banned from attending their daughter's soccer games over wearing pink armbands that have XX written on them in protest of the inclusion of biological males in female sports. On female sports teams. These biological males are on female sports teams. So according to the local news outlet in New Hampshire, several parents showed up to a soccer game between these two high schools, and these parents were wearing these armbands. Several parents had previously raised the issue to the school athletic director. His name is Mike DeSelitz, and they raised this issue about Bow students. So it's Bow High School versus Plymouth Region High School. The Bow students were competing against a team that had a biological male on their roster. So the girls soccer team at Bow High School was facing the Plymouth Regional High School sports or soccer team, and on that girls soccer team was a biological male, and they raised issues with the athletic director. They said there's nothing that they can do because a federal judge in New Hampshire had blocked the state from enforcing its ban on biological males in female sports. So after the game, officials stopped the game, or at the game, officials stopped the game. Okay, so they demanded the armbands be removed, and then they issued no trespassing orders against at least 2 parents. What kind of wannabe tyrannical nonsense is this? You know that if somebody was sporting a rainbow bracelet or there would have been no issues. If somebody was sporting LGBTQ pride and, say that made Christians uncomfortable, right? If somebody was sporting a rainbow bracelet, they would not be asked to take that rainbow bracelet off. There would be no issue if there was a rainbow bracelet that somebody was sporting for LGBTQ pride or whatever. So I don't know where they got the nerve, because this is a blatant violation of the Constitution. Anthony Foote, according to the Post-Millennial, says, my daughter was playing in a homecoming game this week, and I'm banned until the 23rd of September. And he said, I can't watch her play in the homecoming game, which is ridiculous. Poor dad. Anthony Foote was issued an order, a no trespassing order, and it was signed by the superintendent of schools, Marcy Kelly, stating, here's what the order said: you are hereby prohibited from entering the buildings, grounds, and property of Bow School District. You are also prohibited from attending any Bow School District athletic extracurricular event or on or off school grounds. So crazy. This is wild. So I checked. I did the research, folks, because I love you. I did the research and I looked around all the public school laws, and nowhere I could not find a single public school law that says a superintendent can demand the removal of pink armbands for being politically incorrect. All the public school laws, there is no clause that says that parents can't wear pink armbands, and it gives and the superintendent has the right to demand that these pink armbands be removed because they're politically incorrect. I've looked everywhere. I can't find that clause in public school laws. So I really hope the Board of Education fires this nut job, the superintendent, because it's extremely concerning that this is the person in charge of education. The fact that a school employee feels so emboldened to act like a dictator, as if she's got the right. I mean, she acts like she's got the right. She has some nerve, and that's not a good sign. I feel bad for the parents of New Hampshire and the kids of New Hampshire, because that's not a good sign of what they're teaching the kids. And it's clear that this superintendent believes that girls' sports should not exist. And that alone should be grounds for termination. That's sexist. I mean, you don't believe girls are entitled to their own sport? Are you serious right now? So, Superintendent of Schools Marcy Kelly, wannabe tyrant, she was on a power trip, and I think she should be terminated immediately. If she's not, the district better get ready, because I guarantee these parents are going to whip up a lawsuit, and I hope they do. All right, I do have to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. I so do appreciate it. We'll be right back. Here is a brief this, interview that I did with the folks at Corn Belt Energy. There is an event going on. Take a listen.
and Crohn's disease. Make your appointment now at 855-7-GASTRO. It's time for you to be...
Good morning. Hey, so do appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and share this out with your normie friends. It's crucial that we get the facts out there. Yeah, Kevin's up this morning. Spread fake news. I don't know what I said was fake. All of it was factual, man. I don't know what to tell you, Kevin. But when we come back, I do want to talk about The View. Obviously, our commander in chief, he was on The View the other day. I'm sure that, like, when he gets out there and he does these interviews and when he talks with the ladies on The View, I'd imagine that, like, they do like they perform the scene ahead of time and then like for the actual show, so they do like a rehearsal, right? I'd imagine that's how this kind of played out, because he actually did like semi well, in a sense that he didn't like walk off the stage and not know where he was. um, but he like stayed right there and he like gave the answers. But I'm sure that they ran through like a rehearsal prior to him doing it like live. So it's unclear what The View is going to talk about once Donald Trump is no longer a part of the political scene. But I'm also unsure why Joe Biden was on The View. Shouldn't he be running the country? Hey, morning. Good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. So do appreciate you tuning in each and every morning. It's a daily show, Monday through Friday. Before we took the break, I was telling you about the wannabe tyrant, Marcy Kelly, the superintendent of schools in New Hampshire at the Bow High School. I think that she was on a power trip and she needs to be terminated immediately. And if she's not terminated, then she better strap up, because I bet there's a lawsuit coming to that district for kicking these parents out for simply wearing an armband in silent protest when it comes to the belief that girls should be competing against girls. That's what these parents were doing. They were silently protesting. This is America. Okay, this was a blatant act, kicking those parents out, banning them from the school. That's a blatant violation of the Constitution. You have freedom of expression in this country. Not sure if she realizes she lives in America, but Marcy, you live in America. All right, I do want to get to sleepy Joe Biden because he was on The View, and I was telling the streamers, as always, I'm live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. You can see me there and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, folks. But I was telling the folks there that Sleepy Joe, every single time he does one of these things, and it actually goes semi-well, and by semi-well, I mean he doesn't get up and leave and like not know where he's at or fall asleep. Okay, that's what I mean by semi well. So he performed semi well, and I think the reason for that is because they must do like a dress rehearsal, prior to the actual performance. Unclear why Sleepy Joe is doing performances on The View when he should be running the country. And I'm not too sure what The View is going to talk about once Donald Trump is out of the political scene, because that seems like that's all they care about. And I don't know what they'll talk about after he's out of the political scene. But Joe Biden, he pretended Donald Trump was a fly, and he pretended to kill that fake fly. That's it. That's the story. So take a listen. Here's our commander chief with the ladies on The View.
Then he just wouldn't go. He was like a bug. He just kept being there. He was like a bug right there. So you felt... Then he just wouldn't go. He was like a bug. He just kept being there. He was like a bug right there. So you felt...
All right. So right there. Oh my. I just noticed this. Joe Biden in this clip, he's sporting a Ukraine flag pin. Oh gosh, this is wild. Oh, wild. I've never seen that. A sitting president wearing a Ukraine flag pin, and that's concerning. And as I told you yesterday, President Zelensky came to the United States. I talked about this extensively, how he came to the United States and he was campaigning for Kamala Harris. To fly a foreign leader in, have him on American soil, and have him campaign for you, that doesn't sound like democracy to me. But democracy, remember, kids, democracy is on the ballot. Ukraine at this point, why don't we just make them the 51st state? Really? Because remember when Joe Biden, oh gosh, those Maui fires, that was complete government negligence, if not, I don't know. It was so negligent, it makes you question whether it was deliberate. People were actually trying to leave the area where the fires were, and government said, nope, you can't leave. You can't go beyond this premise. And then, the power lines, you guys remember the story from Maui where the power lines came down in this storm, and the government, they didn't clear out this brush. You're supposed to do controlled burnings, okay, in order to prevent, but because they're so green weenie there, and the governor there, and the leadership there, they said they were not doing controlled burns anymore because, oh no, emissions or whatever, or the planet, it's going to go up in flames if we don't do controlled burns anymore. But you're supposed to do controlled burns, and it's been scientifically, trust the science, it's been scientifically proven that actually prevents forest fires, and that prevents fires from breaking out. That's why we do them, okay, controlled burns. So they stopped doing those because green weenie nonsense, and then the power lines came down. It caused the entire island to go up in flames. So just government negligence. They were supposed to shut down the power because they knew this storm was coming. They were supposed to shut down the power to these power lines, so that way if the power lines come down, it doesn't start a fire. Okay, they were given direct orders to do that. Nobody did it. So, yeah, I mean, just government negligence. Joe Biden, gave the people of Maui like $700 per household, whereas Ukrainians, they had at that time, $2,500 per citizen. Okay, so $152 billion earmarked for Ukraine. That's a ton of money. At this point, what we need to do is just make them the 51st state. Our sitting president, has a Ukraine flag strapped to his chest or pinned to his chest. At this point, they might as well just be the 51st state. So, gosh, I'm sorry. That infuriated me. I didn't realize that he was wearing a Ukraine pin at the time when I pulled this clip, and I just went on a tangent. But that's what we do here at Conservative Cat. So the story is he smacked that fly. So you can kind of hear it here in the clip. I'm just going to play the portion here where you can kind of hear him smack the table. So take a listen.
So you felt
right here. All right. So he smacks the table, and he's pretending to kill a fake fly that is Donald Trump. He's pretending that this fly is Donald Trump. Again, it's unclear who the most powerful person in the world is. I hardly doubt it's this old guy pretending to kill fake flies. But what's even more pathetic is the seals. They're laughing like the trained seals that they are. And it's really making a laughing stock of the world. Pretending to kill your political opponent, not a good look. Not a good look. So according to the Post Millennial, there was another segment where Joy Behar questioned Joe Biden. If you want to call it questioning, it's not really questioning. But so Joy Behar said to Biden that Trump is now, quote, blaming rhetoric from you that you inspired these two assassination attempts after all the calls for violence, take them out, all the rest of it. You know what it is. I'm reading her quotes here. Don't you think that's just unbelievable? What do you say to that? Okay, so she asks what is kind of a question. I am going to play this other segment, not the fly killing segment, but the other segment where Joy Behar kind of asks a question of him about his rhetoric. We know that Joe Biden had said something like, we got to put a target, or we got to put him in a bullseye. That was what Joe Biden said, I think quite literally like a day or two before the first assassination attempt. So his rhetoric has contributed to the violence. Joe Biden's rhetoric. He has called MAGA people extremist. He has called you, if you voted for Donald Trump, an extremist. He said that you're a threat to democracy. He's always attacked voters along with Donald Trump, and he's caused a lot of division in this country, probably the most divisive president in history. So I'm going to play this segment on the other side. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Be sure to find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. We'll be right back. What? Who's Kevin and what did he say? I think Kevin just pops on in the morning and he like says something quippy. He says spread fake news, and I was just like, okay, what fake news have I spread this morning? I've only done 3 stories. So far, I've talked about early voting in Illinois. I've also talked about the armbands that parents were wearing, where they had pink armbands and they had XX on them. And these parents were given no trespassing orders. They were told that they can't go to the school's extracurricular activities or athletic activities on or off campus. School grounds. So these parents were banned because they were expressing themselves freely, which is a blatant violation of the Constitution, and the superintendent should be terminated for that. But Kevin pops on, I think, in the morning, and he just says something quippy, Jacqueline. Don't know where he went. Leftists, that's kind of what they do. They come, they say their piece, and then they leave because they don't want to answer for what they believe in or what they have to say, because they actually don't believe it themselves. They just are regurgitating information that's fed to them by their mainstream media outlets. But he comes every morning. I mean, he's a loyal listener. Love you, Kevin. I love that you listen. I love that you come and you contribute. I wish you'd stick around, and then we can converse with each other. But if you're watching, go ahead and comment. Let me know, what should Joe... I want to ask this question. What should Joe Biden be doing? Anything else besides going on The View and performing for everybody? So there's plenty of other things he could be doing right now. What should he be doing besides giving a performance on The View? Let me know in the comment section, and also subscribe to the channel. When we come back, I am going to play this segment from Joy Behar. Joy Behar, she talked with Joe Biden on The View and was asking him questions. I don't even really want to call it a question, but she like formed it in like a form of a question, kind of. She goes, Trump's blaming you essentially for your rhetoric. What do you have to say for that? But she adds all of her own flavor. She goes, don't you just think that's unbelievable? So before she asks the tough question, what would you say to that? Where you would just, get him to respond to Trump blaming him for the violent rhetoric, for the 2 assassination attempts, and correlating the violent rhetoric, and hey, that's contributed to these assassination attempts. Before she asks him, hey, what do you think about that? She gives him the answer. It's incredible. She says, don't you think that's unbelievable? So she actually provides the answer. You think it's unbelievable, right? That's just, it just goes to show you that these people aren't serious and that this is a performance. They feed him his response prior to him actually giving his response. And you'll see it play out on the other side here when we come back for the radio friends. But did Sleepy Joe forget that his party performed a de facto coup on him? They removed him from, or really, I call it uninstalled because I think that he was installed. I think that the election was stolen in 2020. Can't change my mind about that. I saw Ruby Freeman in the video feeding the same ballot through the tabulator multiple times. There's plenty of other examples, putting up cardboard so people can't see into the polling place, changing election law at the last minute. All of this contributed to stealing the election in 2020. Also, censoring the Joe Biden laptops, or the Hunter Biden laptop story. There's so many things that contributed to stealing that 2020 election. But anyway, they committed a de facto coup. I do believe Joe Biden got 14 million votes or something in the primary, and something like that in the primary. But he was removed. He was, told, hey, you can't be on the ballot, although you got all these votes. And I don't know about you, but that's not very democracy. That's not very democratic to not allow the election to take place with the nominee that you had planned and had run in the primary. And Kamala never ran in a primary. So I don't know if he forgot that his party ousted him. It wouldn't be surprising that he forgot, because I'm sure he has to be reminded every day that he's the president. Joe, you're the president. Huh? I'll be right back. Hey there, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. I so do appreciate you tuning in each and every single morning. Yes, before we took the break, I was telling you about Joy Behar kind of asking a question of Joe Biden on her show on The View. So the host, Joy Behar, said to Joe Biden that, hey, did you know that Trump is now blaming you for these 2 assassination attempts because of your rhetoric? And she gives him the answer prior to asking him what he thinks about that. So listen to this. It's quite incredible. This is obviously a performance. These are not serious people. Otherwise, they wouldn't feed him the answers prior to him actually delivering an answer. So take a listen.
Now he's blaming rhetoric from you that you inspired these 2 assassination attempts. After all of the calls for violence, take them out, all the rest of it, you know what it is. Don't you think that is just unbelievable? And what do you say to that?
Well, I think he is the most unusual president. No. Look, when I ran, I said I was running. One of the first major speeches I made was for Independence Hall about democracy.
Yeah.
That democracy is at stake.
And to restore the soul of this country.
Yes.
The soul.
I ran for 3 reasons. I said I wanted to restore the soul of the country, meaning a sense of decency and honor.
Yep.
Secondly, I wanted to
a sense of decency. I'm pretty sure under your leadership, there were people screwing around in the Senate chambers. I've got to look that story up. I can't remember who it was. I think it was just a staffer, but they were quite literally screwing each other, 2 men, in the Senate chambers or Senate. I forget exactly where it is, but it's there in Washington, D.C., and they filmed it. So yeah, decency's on the ballot, or, I wanted to bring decency. Joe, there was a pair of transgender boobs on the White House lawn. What do you mean, decency? Okay, you weren't bringing decency to anything. There was I forget who it was. It was some sort of trans TikToker who was there, had these fake boobs, and flashed everybody on the White House lawn. And yeah, decency. Come on. You're probably the least decent president. This is the least decent presidency I've ever seen. Sam Britton stealing ladies' clothes out of an airport. I mean, the list goes on. These people are not decent people. Your administration are not. They're full of indecent people.
make the middle class grow, because when it grows, everybody does well. And thirdly, I wanted to bring the country back together. And I was told we couldn't do any of those things. But we've gotten a lot of them done. And look, Trump is...
The country's more divided now than ever. Okay, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Careful.
There's not a lot of social redeeming value there.
No, you think?
All right, so that was that segment. I'm sorry I had to do that to you. I don't think Joe remembers that his party performed a de facto coup on him, where they ripped him off of the ballot for the general election because he was coming in second, and they couldn't stand that. So they said, you know what, let's sub out Joe Biden for Kamala Harris, who's received no votes. So if Joe is on The View, if Sleepy Joe's on The View and Kamala Harris is out pretending to campaign, who's leading the country? Who is leading the country? I mean, unclear what faceless bureaucrat is running things there, but it's probably the same guy who's calling the shots for Kamala Harris, because we all know that she is a mindless puppet as well. I do have to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. I'll be right back.
supervised by cameras, poll watchers, and Democratic and Republican election judges. And you don't have to worry whether your ballot made it to our office. With our new process, you can actually track your ballot. Would you like to see who's on your ballot before you vote? We have more than just a generic sample ballot. You can type in your address and see exactly what your ballot will look like. Just Google McLean County Clerk and click on the elections link for all your election information. Tax and Accounting Plus. Focus on growing your business and servicing your customers while Tax and Accounting Plus handles your payroll and bookkeeping.
Normal Police Department expresses their appreciation for the actions of off-duty Normal Police Officer Jeremy Flood, who's credited to saving a man's life at a local gym. The felon's lapse from a cardiac event, Flood quickly intervened, checking for a pulse and performing chest compressions. After using an AED to administer shock, he continued CPR until the man became responsive. Early voting gets underway today.
Colorado State Board of Elections spokesman Matt Dietrich said at the start of the early voting season, voters will likely have to vote at their county clerk's office.
A couple of weeks into the process, or a few weeks ahead of Election Day, you'll see pretty substantial expansion of early voting locations in some of our larger counties.
The increase in early voting locations typically correlates with the number of early votes cast. Dietrich explained that the closer Election Day is, the more early votes are cast, so more locations will open.
People aren't necessarily rushing out on, in this case, on September 26th to cast their vote. Some are, but generally we see most of the early voting being done in that last couple of weeks prior to Election Day.
I'm Katrina Pearson.
News on the air, on the web, on your app, and on Alexa, I'm Tom Davis. Here's the Bloomington Normal forecast on Cities 92.9. Sunny today with a high near 78. Cloudy tomorrow with a low of 62. Drizzly cloudy with a slight chance of showers Friday, high 76. Chance of showers Saturday at 75. And a chance of showers Sunday with a high near 76.
This weather report is submitted by DHB's Garage Doors, residential and commercial garage doors and entry doors since 1926. Schedule service at dhbsgaragedoors.com.
Cities 92.9 sports. We'll start with something that hasn't been said since May 12th. The Sox go for a sweepless series. The White Sox beat the LA Angels in 10-3-2. And as bad as the Sox have been this year, they did sweep Tampa Bay in April in Arctic conditions, and they did take the first 3 of 4 games set in Cleveland before losing the fourth game. Sox and Angels today at the rated 1-2 to close out the game there. The Cubs lost to the Soviet up over Philadelphia Phillies 9-6, and the Cardinals beat Colorado again 5-2. Today's most likely the last major league sporting event at the Oakland Coliseum as the A's will face the Rangers. Oakland moves to Sacramento next season and eventually to Las Vegas. At least that's the plan. I'm Chris Murphy, Cities 92.9 Sports.
Woohoo! Hey, good morning. We've talked about so much here in the 6 o'clock hour. Earlier in the show, I talked about early voting beginning today. Early voting sites are open in nearly every county in Illinois, except Cook County and the city of Chicago, where things are going to get going in early October. 40 days out prior to Election Day. That's traditionally when, and that is, law. 40 days out is when early voting opens. So Illinois State Board of Elections, Matt Dietrich said, at the start of early voting season, voters will likely have to go vote at their clerk's office, their county clerk's office, McLean County Clerk office there in downtown Bloomington. And then eventually, as weeks go on, more and more early voting locations will open up. And that correlates with the number of early votes cast. As that increases, more locations will also open. We talked about that. We talked about Biden killing a fake fly, pretending it's Donald Trump. It was a segment on The View, very weird. And this segment on The View, he talks about decency, and that's why he ran. I want to...
Look, when I ran, I said I was running. One of the first major speeches I made was for Independence Hall about democracy.
Yeah.
That democracy is at stake.
And to restore the soul of this country.
Yes.
The soul.
I ran for 3 reasons. I said I wanted to restore the soul of the country, meaning a sense of decency and honor.
And a sense of decency and honor. I wanted to talk about that. That's why he ran for president, Sleepy Joe Biden. Let's talk about decency, because under your leadership, we had a Senate staffer who filmed public sex in Congress. And yes, he was fired for that. He was filming himself having sex in a Judiciary Committee hearing room. He no longer has a job. That's Senator Ben Cardin. He was a Democrat from Maryland, and he's a staffer for Senator Ben Cardin. Okay, and Aiden is the guy's name, the U.S. Senate staffer. Okay, so he worked for Ben Cardin, and he filmed it. I mean, he was a 24-year-old legislative aide. I mean, okay, Joe, are you really about restoring decency? Because that's number one. Number two, the White House said transgender model would be banned from future events because of photos and videos that showed her topless on the South Lawn during an LGBTQ Pride Month. He allowed that. He allowed Rose Montana, the trans model, to flash everybody on the White House lawn. There was also Sam Brinton, of course, who stole clothes from an airport from a designer, a fashion designer. Sam Brinton, the ex-Department of Energy official, was caught stealing women's suitcases from airports. Not very decent, not very restoring the soul of America. Okay, so I hate when these people bring up decency in democracies, because they are not decent people, and they are the biggest offenders when it comes to being against democracy, i.e., their nominee has received 0 votes. So it really peeves me off, Joe, when you say, "Oh, I was running and I've done a lot of those things where I've restored decency." Give me a break. All right, when we come back, I've got a few things that I want to talk about. One being the Swedish grandmother who is now going to be in prison for selling baked goods on Facebook during the pandemic. She sold them once during the pandemic, and she's going to prison for it. I'll be back with that story next on Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Good morning, friends. So do appreciate you tuning in each and every morning. I so do appreciate you being here and subscribing to the YouTube channel. That really helps us out. Joe Biden pretending to kill a fly, and he says that, oh, and this is Donald Trump, right? And he smacks the table and he pretends that he's killing a fly who is Donald Trump, which is just outrageous. You might see Joe Scarborough up here. We are going to be talking about these guys, Joe and Mika. They were given new talking points to blame Donald Trump's rhetoric for anything that's going on in Springfield, Ohio. That's next on Conservative Cat. Woo! Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. I so do appreciate you being here. It's a daily show, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. every single day. We are going to have your election coverage from now, leading all the way up to the election. Early voting does start today. If you have any questions, go ahead, give me a text. 309-451-9299. It begins in nearly every county in Illinois, except Cook County today and the city of Chicago, as things are going to be getting going in early October. And, I had done this story. My main question would be, as early voting locations begin to open up, September 26th, not a whole lot of people are rushing out to go vote. They usually wait until the last couple of weeks prior to the election day. A lot of people aren't necessarily rushing out, and that's why you'll progressively see more early voting locations open up. Right now, most early voting locations are in the clerk's offices around the state. County clerk's offices around the state. You can go vote there for sure. Early voting is taking place. Now, my main concern, multiple early voting locations, staffing, security. I mean, these are buildings with voting machines, right? We should make sure that they're secure. And does it run the risk as you open more up of security or staffing concerns? So I brought this up to Matt Dietrich. He's the spokesman of the Illinois State Board of Elections, the election authority in Illinois. In October of 2022, the Eastland Mall was an early voting location. We saw this happen where it was broken into and vandalized at the time, according to reports. McLean County Clerk Kathy Michael said there was no damage and nothing stolen from the voting site at the voting site. And Dietrich, they said that they're not seeing this around the state. Where there is issues with security, people breaking into voting locations and possibly stealing or vandalizing things. He said that's not an issue at all, and that specific incident was an outlier. He said, quote, we have had reports of security we haven't had reports of security problems with the jurisdictions that have locations other than the central clerk's office. That's a question that I had. I was like, you know what? Is there an issue with that? And I raised the question. Apparently, there's no issues with that at all. All right, I do want to get into this story. Joe and Mika, Joe and Mika from The Morning Joe. Man, we talked about the ladies from The View. Joe Biden, he was in some sort of performance with the ladies of The View. And he says, oh, the reason why I got into the running in 2020 was because I wanted to restore the soul of America and I wanted to bring decency back to the nation. Okay, well, I brought up just three. I could probably name a ton, but just three stories that defeat that narrative that you have not brought. In fact, you've made it much worse. We have Senate staffers who are filming themselves having sex with two men. They were having sex in this Judiciary Committee hearing room. They filmed it. It was a staffer for Senator Ben Cardin, Democrat of Maryland. There was this woman or man who is pretending to be a woman, Rose Montoya. He's a transgender model and activist, and he says that he's living his truth and he wasn't trying to be vulgar and profane when he flashed everybody with his fake boobs on the White House lawn. I don't know, decent, not decent. You tell me. There's also this guy, Sam Britton, who was in the administration ex-Department of Energy official. High up there, by the way. He had security clearances. He was like in the nuclear program. He had very high level security clearance when it comes to being a high-ranking official. This guy was a high-ranking official, Sam Brinton. We know that this fashion designer was reunited with her clothes that were swiped from her by Sam Brinton. Okay, so Sam Brinton stole ladies' clothes from airports, ladies' suitcases from airports. So I don't know about you, but all of that doesn't sound like very decent to me. Now, I do want to get to this story. Joe Scarborough, Mika, they got new talking points. The mainstream media, they have new talking points. The residents of Springfield are going through what's called a alien invasion, I would say, massive immigration crisis, but nobody in the media seems to give a damn. They don't even care enough to ask questions as to what's going on. Why are they being shipped specifically to Springfield, Ohio? Is it that Ohio is a swing state? Could it be that? Instead, the left has decided to victim blame the residents who live there and say that they're the problem. Oh, the Springfield, Ohio residents are the problem, and they're the racists. And they've decided to use this incident where we have massive immigration crisis, and they've used this story and manipulated it in such a way that they're going after Trump with it. So while the media couldn't even be bothered to pretend to care about the residents of Springfield, Ohio, Morning Joe is blaming Trump as if he's the only one, as if he's not the only one promising to end the insanity there. Okay, so he has promised, hey, once I get into office, I'm going to stop the flights. I'm going to stop the flights of these Haitian immigrants being shipped. There's like 20,000 plus immigrants that have been shipped to this little tiny area. I mean, in Springfield, Ohio. So MSNBC host Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, they were talking about how Trump's disgusting and his hateful comments have upended the lives of Springfield residents. Unclear what she thinks about the policies, right? There's no policies, or she doesn't talk about the policies that have actually upended the people's lives there. But like I said, I don't think she really cares about the policies that have upended their lives in that area. So let's take a listen to Morning Joe and Mika Brzezinski.
Yesterday's show, we picked apart the false narrative emerging from several prominent voices that Donald Trump might be unfit for office, but they can't yet vote for Vice President Harris because she hasn't given enough details about her policies.
Well, I mean, you listen to Donald Trump on the policies.
And, you should...
And you're like going, is this Lincoln?
Right.
Like, is this like a
He talked again yesterday.
King, a bit of Aristotle
I'm sure that was helpful to you.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind when listening to some of what Trump had to say at his rally last night in Pennsylvania.
And Vladimir wanted it badly. That was the apple of his eye. Ukraine was the apple of his eye. But I said, don't do it. He would have never gone in, would have never happened. All these things would have never happened. But Ukraine now, I see Zelensky is here. I think Zelensky's the greatest salesman in history. Every time he comes into the country, he walks away with $60 billion. Billion. Walks in with $60 billion. He wants them to win this election so badly. From even before, as president-elect, if I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you got to make a deal. This is crazy. What a horrible thing has happened just because, and it's our fault because it's a war that should have never been allowed to happen. We didn't have one terror attack during my administration. With all the terror attacks all over the world, we didn't have countries fighting each other. They wouldn't have done it without my permission. They would call me up to ask whether or not they could go to war with some other country. And I said, you can't do that. And if you do that, I'm going to put big, big taxes all over your country. Okay, we won't do it. And they'd call me up the next day. We've decided not to go to the war. We had no wars. These guys actually want these people in our country. It's not even believable. Working with left-wing nonprofits to inundate Pennsylvania communities, changing the character of small towns and villages all over our country and changing them forever. They will never be the same. They will never be. Do you think Springfield will ever be the same? I don't think. The fact is, and I'll say it now, you have to get them the hell out. You have to get them out. I'm sorry. To get them out. Can't have it.
there's an alien invasion going on. Now, I'm going to skip back to when they start talking about this, specifically the Springfield migrants. Let's take a listen to these journalismers or these hosts, MSNBC, talking about Donald Trump and his speech that he delivered in Pennsylvania. I wanted to play the Ukraine thing because that's going to be important a little bit later in the show, but let's take a listen to the MSNBC host.
Call the weave. There were so many disgusting, hateful things in there. It's hard to keep up. I know we're focused on foreign policy, but if I could just say his comments about Springfield, yeah, Springfield has never been the same since Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and their violent rhetoric has wreaked chaos, havoc, fear, and upended the lives of countless people in that town. Ohio's Republican governor wrote an op-ed asking Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to stop, explaining the damage they have done to Springfield, and speaking up for the legal Haitian immigrants who live in Springfield, who add to the economy, who add to the society, who are good people. And it was very, very clear what is going on in Springfield is at the hands of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and that violent rhetoric. Yesterday's show, we picked apart the false.
Okay. So, wow, that woman is incredibly stupid. How can she say this all with a straight face, folks? I just don't understand how she can say this with a straight face, that the violent rhetoric has wreaked havoc, chaos, fear, and has upended the people's lives in that town in Springfield, Ohio. And then she doesn't acknowledge what's actually going on in that town. What Joe Biden has done, he has flown alien invaders into this small town. The Springfield residents, they have a lot of problems. Donald Trump's rhetoric is not one of them. J.D. Vance's rhetoric is not one of them. So there was Brzezinski, the Morning Joe co-host, and her husband. I guess they're married, the two of them. I don't know why she wouldn't take his last name. I'm going to double check that. I think they're married, the two of them. But she goes on and she says that his rhetoric is the problem. The problem is the illegal immigration massive crisis that's going on there. Why should Springfield have to take on Haiti's burden? And why is the media concerned about the violent rhetoric and not actually what's going on there? Could it be because they actually don't give a crap? And claiming that Springfield wouldn't have any of these problems had these people never arrived is not hateful. It's an objective fact. They wouldn't have problems where Haitian immigrants are carrying geese out of lakes by their necks and eating them, okay? They wouldn't have the problems that the hospitals are filled, the children aren't getting educated because the schools are filled with Haitian immigrants. I mean, come on. Of course they wouldn't have any of these problems if there weren't these massive immigration, flying these, this massive immigration crisis where Joe Biden has flown these immigrants in to a swing state, by the way, and they're not investigating that. They don't care. Why Springfield, Ohio? Nobody's even asking that question. Why is it Springfield, Ohio is the target of all of these immigrants being flown into there? If the government can't afford to help out American citizens, there's no way we can help foreign nationals. And I'm sorry, the Americans are being treated like third-class citizens in the towns that they built. Okay, and the fact that the media is not even pretending to care about this, and they care more about words that Trump actually never said. Notice how she says, he says disgusting and hateful things, but she never says what those disgusting and hateful things are. Okay, so there is no evidence. She should really say, allegedly, he says disgusting and hateful things, because give me the evidence. What makes it hateful? What makes it disgusting? The fact that he's just objectively saying, hey, the Springfield residents wouldn't be having problems if it not have been for flying these Haitian immigrants into that area. Springfield it will never be the same. It has never been the same since Kamala Harris and the Biden regime have flown in these people, and flying these people in have wreaked havoc, chaos, fear, and has really upended the lives of countless people in that town. So, this has nothing to do with Trump, and it has everything to do with this massive immigration crisis. All right, I do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I am going to get to grandma. There was a Swedish grandma. She's 70 years old. She was selling baked goods during the pandemic online on Facebook, and she did it once. Okay, she sold baked goods once online, and now she's going to prison. Yes, this is what happens in silly countries. And it could be happening. I want to file this under, hey, pay attention, America, because it could happen here. All right, I'll be right back.
Living in normal areas in Richmond and Visitor Bureau Board of Directors announced Marty Hickman, the Mandy Bureau's interim executive director. He joined the group just earlier this month, with the appointment coming after former CEO Crystal Howard stepped down in August. A bill filed at the Illinois State House to make non-citizens who register to vote felons is being labeled as a stunt by Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Republicans filed House Bill 5875 earlier this month and lined up sponsors. The measure makes it a Class 4 felony for any non-citizen that registers to vote, or for anyone who knowingly registers non-citizens to vote. Asked about the effort Wednesday, Pritzker dismissed the measure.
It's a stunt. It was already illegal to vote if you are a non-citizen. So if you can't register to vote without ID, and you can't vote if you are a non-citizen.
State Representative Adam Beamer, who's a chief co-sponsor of the measure, acknowledged the Republicans' measure likely won't advance anytime soon.
In the state of Illinois, obviously, it's not going to go anywhere, but we need to keep filing bills like this. And as Republicans, we need to stand united against illegal immigration and safeguard our elections and safeguard our communities.
In Springfield, I'm Craig Bishop.
News on the air, on the web, on your app, and on Alexa, I'm Tom Davis.
Here's the Bloomington Normal forecast on Cities 92.9.
Sunny and today with the high near 78. Cloudy and today with the high 62. Drizzly cloudy with a slight chance of showers Friday, high 76. Chance of showers Saturday at 75, and a chance of showers Sunday with a high near 76.
At BC Bank, we're proud to connect communities through financial outreach and economic opportunity, building a stronger, more vibrant community. BC offers tools and resources to individuals, families, and business owners to achieve financial success, building strong financial futures, one family, one street, one city at a time. BC Bank, member FDIC, proud to be the official bank of the Fighting Illini.
McLean County Asphalt and Materials has been helping businesses and homeowners improve their curb appeal since 1964. Whether you're in need of mulch, decorative stone, peel-on pavers, or granite boulders, the team at McLean County Asphalt and Materials is here to help you. You don't need to have a big truck or know someone who does, because McLean County Asphalt and Materials will deliver the material right to your job site. Get started now with their materials calculator at McLeanCountyAsphalt.com. Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all of that, and right now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find you the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/radio to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/radio. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/radio.
Cities 92.9 Sports.
It won't be enough to save Ali Marmol's job, but the Cardinals have played some good ball as of late, with the operative word being late. They've won 79 after beating Colorado 5-2, but the fans bailing on the team has finally caught the attention of the highest ups in the Cardinals organization. So look for some changes. Cubs lose at Philly 9-6 as the investment in Brewers manager Fred Counsell didn't pay off this year. White Sox avoid lost 121 again as Andrew Benedetti again singles over a winning run in a 10-inning 3-2 win over the Angels. In exhibition hockey last night, Blackhawks lose to Detroit 4-2. I'm Chris Murphy, Cities 92.9 Sports.
Caves
Chris Murphy.
At Tax and Accounting Plus, they're rock stars, but instead of microphones and guitars, they use spreadsheets. Focus on growing your business and servicing your customers while Tax and Accounting Plus handles your payroll and bookkeeping. Find the experts at taxaccountingplus.com.
I think I'm going to cat. Yeah, what's new, cat?
Woo! Good morning. Hey, it's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. So do appreciate you tuning in each and every morning. Yes, on election day, we will have an election show from 7 to 9 p.m. where I will be trying to get as many results as possible. I highly doubt we will call anything that night because of the mail-in ballot situation. You never know, because election day is more like election 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks, you can accept mail-in ballots 2 weeks after the election. So that's just the facts. I will have candidates on. I will be providing you as many results as I possibly can, being that we don't know how many mail-in ballots will come in the weeks afterwards. And then after 9 o'clock, Fox News, they'll have updates for you as it pertains to Donald Trump's race. So you are going to want to come here to 92.9, Cities 92.9, were your election headquarters. Okay, before I took the break, I was telling you about Swedish grandma. Swedish grandma. So the government has sentenced this 70-year-old grandmother to prison for selling baked goods. Yeah, she sold baked goods once on Facebook. It's unclear why that's a crime. As the only criminality I think here is committed by the government. Okay, to call this tyrannical elder abuse would be an understatement. This is tyranny, and in this story, she's not named. So, for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to call her grandma. Okay, so the article does not name this woman, but it's really kind of sad. During the pandemic, she started sharing her love for baking online, as any adorable grandma would do, when the media fearmongers told them to stay at home and you're under house arrest. Okay, you have to stay at home, says the media. So her desserts, of course, look delicious. Somebody asked to buy some. Okay, and she agreed, but for no profit. She made $0 off of the transaction. She just charged for supplies. Okay, so she sold baked goods once to one person who said, "It's so delicious, I'd love to buy some." However, the Swedish government had a problem with this because they had nothing better to do, I guess, that day. Subsequently, they fined her thousands of dollars, but she couldn't pay that because she's obviously on a fixed income. She's 70 years old. Thus, they sent her to the slammer. They sent her to the slammer, to prison. You would think that the country that's suffering from gang violence, overcrowding prisons, would just leave poor grandma alone. Leave her alone. Okay, but these aren't moral people. So, according to Publica, Frida Larson, the senior's defense attorney, okay, because like I said, this article does not name the grandmother. Frida Larson is the attorney of hers, has told local press that they intended to appeal the decision to send her to the slammer. She's old. She has health problems. She cannot see herself being able to cope with that, going to prison. It's taken a very serious toll on her. She's very depressed. This is just disgusting. Just disgusting. It's one thing if she had committed a crime, okay? It's a whole other thing. She just wanted to share her love with baking with a friend, one friend. The fact that the government has prioritized this as if it's an issue. This is state-sanctioned elder abuse, and no one should be here for it. I'm not here for it. This is terrible. Some Swedish outlets have reported the senior has refused to pay the fine as an act of defiance. The attorney of the senior, of grandma, she says that's untrue. The woman simply did not have the financial means to wrangle with this massive bill. Don't these people have, I don't know, illegal aliens to worry about? Because it's happening all over the country, the illegal aliens. There's uprising in every single country. The residents are sick and tired of it. But I guess there's no way for these tyrants to fund their alien invasion without fining legal residents into oblivion. Okay, so they've got to fine these people to pay for the illegal immigrants in those countries, give them free healthcare, give them cell phones, things like that. So it's clear that the Swedish government hates people, hates its people, its legal residents, and I feel so bad. Free grandma, free her. Okay, free this poor little grandmother. All right, I do want to take a quick break, but making America great again means also making people healthy again. And I want to bring this up because there is an obesity crisis. And more than 40% of school age children and adolescents have at least one chronic health condition. That's per the CDC. Okay, but the powers that be don't care about the obesity problem. They don't care that kids are sick. So Robert Redfield was the former director of the CDC during the start of the pandemic, and he was replaced by Rochelle Walensky. Gag. Likely he was replaced because he wasn't as radical as the bureaucracy would have wanted him to be, and they demanded he be radical and shut things down. And Robert Redfield was like, well, I don't know. And I've got this story. He comes out and he endorses. So the former director of the CDC endorses Donald Trump. So he has like this. It's a Newsweek, I think it is. Yeah, an op-ed. So we're going to be walking you through Robert Redfield's op-ed here on the other side. It's Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We'll be right back. Woohoo! Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. So glad that you're here with me. Find me on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. Subscribe to the channel. Share it out with your normie friends. It's important we get this information out there, folks. Okay, to make America great again, we have to make people healthy again. Come on. Obese. This is something that we can all agree on. Come on, leftist. You have to agree on this. Kids, they're sick. 40% of school-age children and adolescents have at least one chronic health condition per the CDC. This is bad. The obesity crisis, powers that be do not care about this. Robert Redfield was the former director of the CDC at the start of the pandemic, and then they replaced him with Rochelle Walensky. And they likely replaced him because she's a radical and he's not too radical. And he wasn't going to be as radical as the bureaucracy wanted him to be. So in 2020, he said, quote, probably one of our greatest casualties of the pandemic this year was the impact on the business community and just general healthcare, the impact on children's education as well. So, however, the left couldn't be bothered to care about any of that. Kids' general health care, their education. They couldn't be bothered by destroying the business community. Okay, they weren't bothered by any of that. They couldn't care. They could care less about any of that because political science took precedence over actual science. You see, and he flirted saying the right thing back then. He flirted with the idea of saying all the right things back then in 2020. Robert Redfield, he was not by any means outspoken about the pandemic. I did not agree with Robert Redfield at the beginning of the pandemic, the decisions that he was making. But at least he said, in 2020, probably one of the greatest casualties of the pandemic this year was the impact on the business community and our general healthcare and the impact on kids' education. But now he's making a whole lot of sense. At least he's making a whole lot of sense now, because guess what? He just endorsed Donald Trump. This is kind of a big endorsement, much like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsing Donald Trump. This is a pretty big endorsement. So I want to play this clip. It is of RFK Jr. talking about Robert Redfield. If you haven't read the Fauci book yet, I highly recommend you do. I've read it. It's great. He goes after Robert Redfield. RFK Jr. does in his book, the Fauci book that he wrote. And this is RFK Jr. talking about the former director of the CDC. He endorsed Trump, Robert Redfield, because he wants to make America's children healthy again. Okay, you start to see where he's crossing over, right? Robert Redfield, I'd imagine he's always voted Democrat. He's crossing over and he's endorsing Donald Trump because he's the only guy who's going to make America healthy again. How do I know that? Because he's the only candidate talking about it. Let's take a listen.
I'll tell you something that interesting that happened today, and I actually was going to mention this to Rand. It was an extraordinary event to me, but Robert Redfield, who I really go after in my Fauci book, kind of a hammer and tongs, wrote an editorial in Newsweek magazine today saying that he was endorsing President Trump because President Trump was going to restore American health, and that President Trump, he said, a lot of people might surprise me to see this, but hear me say this, but he has chosen exactly the only person who can do this, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This was breathtaking to me because this is the guy who's the head of the CDC that I've been criticizing for years. And then this afternoon, he came over and had lunch with me. It's the first time I've ever met him. And the first thing he said to me is, "You got everything right."
Wow.
You got everything right. He had lunch with Robert Redfield, said, you got everything right about me in your book. He goes after him pretty hard in his book, and he goes after the CDC. He's been doing this, RFK Jr., for years. For years, he's been talking about the health crisis in America. So per his Newsweek op-ed, RFK Jr. mentioned it in that clip, that he wrote an op-ed, and he does endorse the Trump team and the Trump administration specifically because he chose RFK Jr. to deal with America's health problem. And here's the Newsweek op-ed. In 2019, the Trump administration set a course to address chronic disease, funding earlier interventions to curb the growing crisis. So Trump tried to do this Back in 2019, when he was president, the Trump administration, they created a course to try to address the chronic disease. They didn't really address it. He had lost in the 2020 election, but he had at least started, right? He started a conversation about it. He started funding earlier inventions to curb the growing crisis of chronic disease, right? 5 years later, this issue is exactly where it needs to be, at the center of a presidential debate, now in a unique partnership. To heal our children, a president must see the possible and lead our nation to act. After more than 40 years in the public health arena, it might surprise some of my colleagues to know I think Donald Trump chose the right man for the job, Robert Kennedy Jr. So he says Robert Kennedy Jr. is the guy to do this, to address the health crisis in this nation. And he goes on and he says, talk of healthcare reform often centers on cost to consumers. We know chronic disease is more than 75% of the country's $4 trillion annual healthcare expenditure. Unfortunately, we have become a sick nation. We're paying too much for chronic disease, and that must change. It's time to make America healthy again. So according to RFK Jr., Redfield told him that he got everything right in his book, which is a blow, right, to the one claiming Trump handled the pandemic poorly. Okay, so that Robert Redfield has said that Trump handled the pandemic poorly. And if you think about it, Trump did everything the left wanted him to do. Okay, during the pandemic, everything the left wanted him to do. He closed down flights from China, and then the left came out and said he was racist for that. Then he started testing on every single corner, testing for COVID-19, and give you the Fauci ouchie, right? He made it to where you could test, where you could get the Fauci ouchie. He handed out stimulus checks. And he did so much more. Everything the left wanted, and now the left is criticizing him for it, which makes no sense. Although I don't agree with everything that Trump did during the pandemic, the left could never do what he did. And they complain as if he started COVID. He created COVID in the Wuhan lab. He didn't create COVID in the Wuhan lab. Unfortunately, our Chinese adversaries did that, and they released it onto the world, right? So I think Trump handled it just as well as anybody could have. And we know the left and Democrats weren't going to handle it well, because if it were up to them, the lockdowns would still be going on today. So as much as the left would love to have another pandemic, that's really not the point here. The reality is we have to make America healthy again, and the Democrats could really care less about that because they're in the pockets of big pharma. Redfield continues in his op-ed. I want to continue with this op-ed because it's important. Okay, this is very important stuff. He goes on, he says, for instance, obesity in American children has increased dramatically since John F. Kennedy's presidency, from around 4% in the 1960s to almost 20% in 2024. The causes of childhood obesity are complex, but the primary origin is clearly modern American diet consists of very highly processed foods. But the food problem goes well beyond obesity. Pesticides are often proven to be a risk factor for neurodevelopment outcomes in kids, causing things like ADHD. So the next president has to prioritize the National Institute of Health to identify which exposures are contributing to the spike in chronic diseases in children. Okay, so the next president has to prioritize that the NIH, these health bureaucracies, have to identify what's going on in the food and what causes the children to have chronic diseases like ADHD. We finally find out and end what slowly is destroying our children. So the NIH needs to be tasked. The president has to make sure that the NIH is tasked with finding out what kind of chemicals are destroying our children. And like I said, because the pharmaceutical industry out lobbies all major industries, the Democrats could care less. In order for Democrats to pretend to care, they'd have to speak against donor interest. And that's not what the left is about. Democrats are not about speaking against their donors. So while Kamala Harris and her regime claim that they're all in it for the little guy, she is a mindless puppet for the powers that be, and that's at the cost of Americans and their health. No matter the consequences of their health, Joe Biden is the same because he's the president right now, and they could address this today if they wanted to. The health crisis in America, the chemicals in our food that are causing the kids to have chronic illnesses. Kennedy is right. The three health agencies, the FDA, the NIH, the CDC, they all suffer from agency capture. So this is something that he talks about in his books as well. He's written several about the three agencies: NIH, CDC, FDA. The NIH is cozy with the biomedical and pharmaceutical companies, and the scientists are allowed to collect royalties from drugs the NIH licenses to pharma. Okay, so it gets complicated quickly, but point is, scientists, doctors, the people who should be helping us, they are benefiting from these pharmaceutical companies who give them money and royalties. So he goes on in his op-ed, he says, as the former director of CDC, I know the agency capture, or like the agency can be influenced by special interest groups. Okay, so the NIH, the CDC, the FDA, here is the former CDC director saying, me being the former director, I know that we're all influenced by special interest groups. So this endorsement, I think, is shocking. It's very shocking, and it's an incredible moment, I think, in the MAGA movement, because making America great again, I mean, it brings us all together. This movement is so cool because it brings us all together, because everybody from all walks of life, there's something worth fighting for. Okay, whatever it may be in your life, there's something in your life that's worth fighting for, and making people healthy is making America great again. So while you may have disagreed with Robert Redfield in the past, I did, especially after reading the Fauci book that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. published. I did not agree with Robert Redfield. It's great that people are coming together for one massive cause, and that's what's so beautiful about the MAGA movement. So Maha, I'm so excited. You can't make America great again if our people are unhealthy. And I'm glad that this is bringing people together. This is actually bringing people together. And Kamala Harris, she's received the endorsement of the IRS, not Robert Redfield, which is arguably probably the worst endorsement that you could get. Trump is actually doing things to strengthen America and weaken the bureaucracy, which is exactly what they hate about this movement so much, which is exactly why they have tried to take shots at the president. So all of that being said, make America healthy again. I do have to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. We'll be right back.
Illinois Retail Merchants Association President and CEO Rob Carr says polling shows overwhelming public support for the Interchange Fee Prohibition Act, law slated to take effect next July. Image claims of credit card companies who charges swipe fees for the state and local sales tax and tip portion of a transaction. Carr disagreed with claims that the law will bring chaos or cause consumers to swipe cards twice. No, in fact, think about it. It's law in the space. If you go to any place that does tips, does your card get swiped twice? Michael LaFrazier of All-in-One Laundry Center and Services said the law means your business will no longer have to pay credit card companies fees on sales taxes and tips.
That tangible savings will allow us to assist more of the customers in need.
Ben Jackson of the Illinois Bankers Association and Ashley Schaff of the Illinois Credit Union League said the survey failed to inform consumers that the law will cause chaos every time they use a credit or debit card.
Hey, good morning. It's Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. I do want to talk about this story. A Texas-based investment company, Austin Private Health, APW, has come under scrutiny for a filing made just before the failed assassination attempt on U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump. So the company is majority held by BlackRock. Okay, this is a huge story. They were short selling Donald Trump stock, Trump Media and Technology Group, and they short sold this stock. So short selling is a financial strategy that involves borrowing security, selling it on the open market, then buying it back at a lower price to return it to the lender, thus profiting from the difference. So this practice often indicates a belief that the stock value will fall. Okay, when you short sell, that means that you think that the stock is going to fall. If Donald Trump were to die, of course his stock would fall. So they betted against, a day before he got the first assassination attempt, they short sold this stock. It's incredible. It's incredible. Not to mention Thomas Crooks, the attempted assassin who died. He donated to ActBlue. He was also featured in a BlackRock commercial. BlackRock largely contributes to Democrats. Let's start to ask questions. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking questions. That's fishy. And if we had a serious media, they'd get to the bottom of it. We need to get to the bottom of who was behind that first Trump assassination attempt. I want to know. I want to know. All right, that's going to do it for us here on Conservative Cat. I so do appreciate you tuning in. You guys have a blessed day. And as always, find me on YouTube, Rumble, and subscribe to the channel. We are going to be back tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. Anytime you miss any of the show, you can find it archived on YouTube. That's the best place to go. You can also find how to get to the YouTube channel via cities92.9.com, 929.com. You can type it in your search bar, and you can find the archived shows there. You have a blessed day. Bye-bye. Love you.